Allen Lund Company wishes all the owner-operators out there a Happy New Year. OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Reddick.
An interest in coffee is what led a woman from Puerto Rico to get into the trucking industry. We'll speak with OOIDA member Natasha Cruz-Sanchez, who says what started out as a challenge to herself turned into a career she loves. Also on today's program, for many years, truckers have watched and listened as supporters and developers of autonomous vehicles have pushed to get their technology out onto public roads. Now, 5 states are considering legislation that would require a human driver to be present in any of those vehicles. Scott Thompson covers that and more with our state legislative expert, Keith Goebel. But first, the news with Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. Our top story today, a bipartisan bill that would push back the deadline for beneficial ownership information reporting has been introduced in the U.S. House. It's called the Protect Small Business from Excessive Paperwork Act. If signed into law, the deadline for the Corporate Transparency Act's beneficial ownership information, or BOI, reporting requirement would be extended to January 1st of 2026. The one-year delay would provide more time not only to inform small businesses of the new reporting requirements, but also for federal courts to resolve cases that could permanently kill the law. The Corporate Transparency Act has had a rocky start. The deadline to file beneficial ownership information was initially set for January 1st of this year, but multiple lawsuits threw a monkey wrench into those plans. Currently, the requirement is not in effect, but pending litigation could change that at any given moment. The new bill, introduced by Congressman Zach Nunn of Iowa, would push the deadline back. A separate bill, introduced in both chambers of Congress earlier this month, would remove the requirements altogether. The Senate on Wednesday confirmed Lee Zeldin to lead the Environmental Protection Agency. The former congressman from New York will spearhead the Trump administration's efforts to roll back environmental regulations that were pursued by the Biden administration. Among the policies in the crosshairs, emission targets. OOIDA was among the trucking groups congratulating Zeldin on his confirmation. In a statement, Association President Todd Spencer said small business truckers, who make up 96% of trucking companies, have faced an uncertain future in recent years from top-down environmental regulations and mandates. Spencer said OOIDA looks forward to working with Zeldin on common-sense environmental policies that consider the local mom-and-pop trucking businesses that keep America's supply chain running. As the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration moves closer to rolling out changes to the Safety Measurement System, or SMS, they're getting the word out on what those changes will look like. The agency, which uses SMS to prioritize motor carriers that require intervention, held its first of 3 webinars earlier this month. The meeting focused on 3 of the 9 changes that are coming. One is a reorganization of the vehicle maintenance and unsafe driving basics, now called compliance categories, that will focus on motor carriers with higher crash rates. FMCSA is also reorganizing more than 2,000 violation codes into approximately 100 violation groups of similar safety behaviors to prevent inconsistencies. And the agency is also simplifying severity weights, replacing the current 1 to 10 weighting scale for violations with a 1 to 2 scale. Along with the condensed violation groups, motor carriers will no longer be dinged for the same type of violation multiple times in the same inspection. Wesley Russell of FMCSA's Transportation Specialist Compliance Division provided an example during the webinar.
So if you have an 11-hour rule violation, for example, and then that 11-hour rule violation ends up changing over and carrying over into causing a 14-hour too, we found that it's not how many of these occurred during that inspection so much as did they occur or didn't they occur, and then we'll send our resources to that particular standpoint or a particular person that had it or company that had it related to, as opposed to how many you did have. So showing this, it also shows that we had it treated motor carriers on a little more even and fairly. A lot more of the same standards were implied there when we were able to do that, along with preventing any inconsistency. So a lot of points because of really one bad inspection type thing, as opposed to did they occur or didn't occur.
As for when the changes take effect, that is still up in the air. FMCSA currently is in the second phase of the update. The launch of the new system will occur in Phase 3. FMCSA's second webinar about the SMS overhaul will take place on February 25th. Despite supporting some of the proposed changes, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association said that FMCSA needs to incentivize actual safety performance over compliance in order to accurately identify at-risk carriers and reduce crashes. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration has added 4 more states to a regional emergency related to fuel shortages. Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, and Minnesota were added on Wednesday, bringing the number of states covered to 43. The declaration was issued earlier this month in response to winter storms and extreme cold and their impact on fuel demand. It provides relief from maximum driving time for motor carriers and drivers providing direct assistance. The transportation of heating fuel, propane, natural gas, heating oil, gasoline, and diesel fuel in affected areas is covered. Brokers are apparently optimistic about the future of the market. The insights come from a recent Bloomberg truck stop survey. In it, brokers express optimism that demand and spot rates will improve significantly throughout 2025. Improving conditions in the second half of 2024 are driving that sentiment. More than half of the respondents said load volume increased compared with the previous year. More than 3/4 of the brokers who responded think load volume will continue to rise this year. And as for spot rates, more than half of respondents expect them to go up as well in the next 3 to 6 months. The autonomous truck company Kodiak says it's using self-driving semis to deliver loads of fracking sand in West Texas. Atlas Energy Solutions began using 2 autonomous trucks in the Permian Basin for deliveries in July. Kodiak says 100 loads have been delivered since then on 21 miles of closed roadways. Atlas plans to continue with and expand on the driverless deliveries moving forward. Meanwhile, the autonomous vehicle company Waymo is expanding into more cities. A report by The Verge said the company is planning to start testing in Las Vegas and in San Diego this year. The goal is apparently to collect data and see how the self-driving software adapts to new locations. To start, the vehicles won't be robo-taxis. Someone will be inside during the early stages. The report comes just days after Waymo announced it was deploying its robo-taxis on freeways in Los Angeles. The state of Texas has launched a sex trafficking awareness campaign that takes a bit of a different tact. It's called Boys and Young Men Are Sex Trafficked Too. The Texas Trucking Association is leading the effort, along with Titus Transport and Bob's House of Hope, a safe house for male survivors. The new campaign aims to shed light on the trafficking of boys and young men, an issue that groups say often gets overlooked. As part of the initiative, stickers will be made available for placement on the back of semi-trucks that provide information about resources. And finally, Love's is delaying the opening of a truck stop off Interstate 70 in Belmont County, Ohio. The location was set to open this month, but Love's says that'll now come later this year. Construction delays are being cited as the reason. That's Lane Line Now News for today. I'm Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Scott. Is education important to you? Are you trying to make sure that your child or grandchild can get a good education at a college or trade school? OOIDA can help. The association is accepting applications for the OOIDA Mary Johnston Scholarship. You can find more information or apply at the website OOIDA.com. Go to the main menu at the top left of the page and under Foundation, click on Scholarship Program. Again, that's at the website OOIDA.com. The deadline is just 2 days away on February 1st. Starting Saturday, Marty Ellis and OOIDA's tour truck, The Spirit of the American Trucker, will be at the Speedway in Yuma, Arizona. That's located at Exit 12 on Interstate 8. Stop in, say hi to Marty, and join OOIDA for a $10 discount. A quick reminder that you can write your elected officials or look up their contact information at the website fightingfortruckers.com. Again, that website, fightingfortruckers.com. Next, we'll find out how an interest in coffee led OOIDA member Natasha Cruz-Sanchez to a career in trucking. And Scott Thompson discusses 5 states pushing for restrictions on autonomous vehicles with our state legislative expert, Keith Goebel. We'll be back in just a moment with more. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
At Truck Stop, we built a better load board for carriers like you. Sign up today and access over 600,000 loads on the most trusted online load board. Learn why the best in the business rely on TruckStop to make more money and start driving your profit today.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Landline Now, welcome back. From a love of coffee to a love of life on the road, Natasha Cruz-Sanchez has had a fascinating career. Landline Magazine's Erin Wisdom Watson recently spoke with the OOIDA member about her journey into the trucking industry.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in the island of Puerto Rico, and I'm originally from Caguas. At that time, I just graduated college, and I tried to find a job, but of course, it was very hard to find a job when the whole island has been destroyed, and I felt the responsibility to help my family out. And I was like, you know what? Let me just go out. So I came to the United States. I didn't have any family members in Washington, D.C. is where I went to. I stayed in Maryland, worked in Washington, D.C. I came only with $500 and good luck. And I was terrified. I'm not going to lie. I was terrified. And my education is in nursing. So I did work as a nurse for a little bit. But my passion is in coffee. That's really where my heart is at. And when I started working in coffee, I really fell in love with the industry to the point that I wanted to learn even more. So after working in a specialty coffee shop in Washington, D.C. for a year, I decided to go to Italy. Mm-hmm. And that's an experience that really opened my mind, my eyes, my heart, everything. And I wanted to keep learning. So when I came back to U.S., there was a coffee event. And because I was like new to the industry, I was a little shy. I didn't know if I should go to this like coffee competition. And it was my first local one. And I won. And I was like, this is so weird, but okay. So the next month, there was another coffee event. And they posted my picture on the social media. And one of the people that were there recognized me. And he approached me and he said, "You're Natasha?" And I was like, "Yes." And he was like, "Hey, I see you on social media. Would you like to come over for a coffee class that I'm going to give?" And I was like, "Let's do it." So that warehouse was in Rockville, Maryland. So I decided to go to a coffee class and I loved it. And it's a huge roastery and they had trucks coming in. And I was like, okay, this business is huge. So at that time, he needed to go for a coffee competition. He's my mentor. He's my friend, he's a coffee roaster and he was going to compete in that year. And he asked me if I wanted to cover him for 2 days. And from working 2 days, I ended up working in that company for 2 years, which is awesome. And working at that company, I was able to learn everything related to the whole coffee supply chain. So, I learned first coffee, the most important part I will say is taking care of the soil. So taking care of the coffee farm. So they sent me to Guatemala. And it was my first time going to other place to a coffee farm other than one in Puerto Rico. So I went to Guatemala. I saw all the process from the coffee before it gets exported to the United States. And there's a lot of things involved. But then when it gets to the United States, it's a whole different process. And that's where trucking comes in place. And I think nobody that I met before has really sit down to think about the role of trucking in coffee. And at that time, I didn't even know until I started observing how everything works. And I remember, and I have this experience to my heart, I received a truck driver. He was so tired. And again, I was ignorant at that time. I didn't know how hard we work, as I include me now in this field. Mm-hmm. And he asked me who could use the restroom. And I said, yeah. And to me, that question was sad because it's a basic thing, human thing to do. A real quick parenthesis. Now I understand why he asked, because when I became a driver, a lot of people don't let me use their restrooms. And I was like, that's crazy. We hit the road for hours and hours. Sometimes we can stop. So, I didn't understand what I did for him at that time, how meaningful it was until I became a trucker. So I was like, yeah, sure, use the restroom. And then when he used the restroom, I was making him coffee. And I got a coffee bag, I got a t-shirt, I got a mug, I got a box. I put a lot of goodies, and I gave him a tour of the facility. And he needed to wait a little bit for being loaded. And at that time, I didn't know the frustration that a trucker goes through when they have to wait for being loaded, especially when they're tired. And the truth is, when you're getting loaded, you feel it in the truck unless you disconnect. So anyways, I took care of him. I gave him a tour, all these things, and he was so grateful. But again, I didn't understand why he was so grateful at that time. And I used to be the person that will receive truckers in that warehouse, and I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like, come back, and I didn't know. So it was a pretty cool experience. But then the pandemic started, and primarily my job was to go to different Costco's on the East Coast, Northeast, the United States. So I was never used to be in the same place all the time. And that's when I really started learning more about the whole process, about everything. And at that time we had a driver. It was a box truck, so you don't need a CDL for a box truck. And I told him, what if we get our CDLs? And he was like, are you sure? And I'm like, I mean, yes, because I really like to see another women in these trucks, because I used to be the one receiving them. I never saw any female drivers. And I personally believe that you need to be the change that you want to see. It's very easy to say, I want this to happen, but are you really to roll your sleeves and get the hands dirty and get into that? So I decided to take on that. But at that time I was married and I was going through a divorce, so I couldn't do it. And at that time I also had to go back home for medical issues. So I was like, you know what, right now is not the time. And I don't think it's correct to force things. I think everything comes whenever you're ready. So I did that. So I decided to go back home, but I still had that thing inside my heart that I wanted to be a driver. So going back home, I also met the coffee farmers that I currently work with. So I went back home with a lot of coffee magazines from all these events I was already going in the United States. And I found these women and I was like, you know what? I would love to work with them one day. And I even had the name of the company at that time. I had like the little logo, but I didn't have quite sure what I wanted to do exactly. I just knew I wanted to have a coffee business someday. So being in Puerto Rico, had my surgery, I came back to the United States, and I didn't want to go back to Maryland because first, it's too cold, and I don't do well with the cold. I love Arizona. A lot of people are like, you're crazy. It's too hot. I love it. And I wanted to try something new. So I decided to come here. My friend will say, well, come here, try it out. I tried to work in different coffee businesses. But most of the positions that they were offering me were working as a barista. And in order to advance in my career, I knew I couldn't be working just behind the bar. I needed to do something else because I was doing quality control, because I was understanding the supply chain. I was going to the farms. I was doing other things that complement the whole aspect of the coffee supply chain. And I wanted to be a truck driver. So I was like, you know what? This is my time. This is my sign to be a truck driver. So I went to different schools and they told me about a grant. And I don't know if many people know about it, but as the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act is a grant that most of states have it, and they pay for your school. So it took around 4 to 5 months to get the whole process put in place, and they paid for my school. So I got to trucking school. It was only 3 women in my class of like 30-something men, and it can be intimidating, right? And I feel like my advice to women when they ask me, hey, how you did it, is like, you got to work on yourself. You got to be confident. You got to believe that you can do it, because some people will try to take you down. And if you let that get into you, it can either like make you even quit from trucking school. So I knew who I was. I knew what I wanted to get done. So it was challenging, but it was good. I finished trucking school. I got my first job. I started in a mega carrier, and it was a class of 20, but 19 were men. So I find the same, challenge again of being the only woman. I was like, you know what? It's okay. I got this. And when I started going over the road and I tasted coffee, I was like, oh, Lord, what? The coffee was bad. The coffee simply was bad. And I was thinking to myself, truck drivers move United States. Without drivers, there's nothing. No goods, no food, no nothing. How come the only time you have to feel normal and to feel human again and to reconnect and to, get up, it is a bad cup of coffee, and everything clicked. That's why the first bag that I have is called Over the Road. It's because I started working over the road. Most drivers start working over the road, and it's a cup of coffee that is so good and so sweet that you can drink it more than once. I feel like coffee should not be just to wake up. That was something in the past. When you go through the coffee history, we have 3 different waves. And one of the first waves is basically people drinking coffee just to wake up. The second wave is people experimenting with sweet, like caramel and chocolate and all these flavors. And the third wave is specialty coffee. That's what I do, which means it's a coffee that's higher quality. And I believe that people should enjoy that coffee just because it tastes good other than to just wake up. Another thing I noticed with drivers was the coffee was very bitter. So you're driving, you drink your coffee, and then you get a heartburn. And I felt that myself because might run out of my coffee. So I was like, I don't want to feel this way. So I had planned to do this year during summer, but that's when the injury happened. I was getting ready to go to work. I was moving stuff around in my house. Honestly, I will tell everybody, learn how to move boxes and be careful, because that's the only thing that took me was a box to misplace my foot in the wrong way, and my knee got twisted and I tore my ACL. All my savings were gone during that time. So it was very frustrating because I saved money to start my business and I had to prioritize my health because I had to, and I thought about not moving forward with it. I was like, this is it. I can't do it. It makes no sense. I can walk. I can work. I need to get surgery. I don't know how long it's going to take. Since the injury has been now 6 months, I still cannot walk properly. But my friends, I had great friends. They were like, no, Natasha, you're not going to quit. You're going to do it. My friends got me the coffee roaster. My friends helped me financially to be able to have the funds to purchase the equipment that I needed. And I've been able to roast at home. And I have to do it sitting down. That's the only way, And I'm happy that I have that support system. And I can say that during this time to anybody, but especially a driver, that we depend 100% on our bodies to do our job. You have to save money. I was able to save 30% of my salary when I became a driver. And saving that 30% is what has allowed me to survive 6 months without working. I'm not getting any Social Security, any disability. I was a 1099, worker, so I don't have any benefits like that. And I feel like that's very important and something that everybody needs to consider, have a plan B. So I don't want to say that thanks to the injury, this is possible, but before I didn't have time. Now I have the time, and I decided to use this time wisely because frustration got into me. And I'm not going to say that I never got frustrated or depressed. I got in a really bad depression. I don't have family members here with me. I had to push through it with only 2 friends here in the state of Arizona, and it's hard. So this is my story. This is everything I've been going through. I've been working in coffee for over 5 years, and I don't think I have to decide if I want coffee or trucking because they both complement very well.
You're listening to Natasha Cruz-Sanchez talking about her journey into the trucking industry. We've got to take a short break, but we'll be back with more from her after this.
Penske owns and operates some of the best-maintained vehicles on the planet. Our used trucks come with a 5-year maintenance report and pre-sale inspection. So if you're in the market for a top-quality pre-owned truck, look no further. Search our inventory today at PenskeUsedTrucks.com.
Capital Reman, the leader in remanufactured diesel engines and components, has partnered with OOIDA to offer exclusive member benefits. Visit CapitalReman.com today to support America's transportation industry and take advantage of your benefits.
Welcome back. You're listening to an interview done by Landline Magazine's Aaron Wisdom Watson, who spoke with OOIDA member Natasha Cruz-Sanchez about her journey into the trucking industry.
I think what I found most interesting about your story is that you do have these dual passions. And just to step back a little bit, when you first decided you wanted to go into trucking, were you thinking that you had to choose? Were you thinking, okay, I love coffee, but I'm going to set that aside and, just do this new thing?
The reason to go to trucking, honestly, it was just to see if I could do it. Because when I worked in the warehouse, I will receive all these truckers, but I never received women. And I was like, that's interesting. And then research shows that only 12% of women, that truck drivers are women in the United States. And I was like, I want to be part of that 12%. But then when I came to Arizona and tried to get into coffee, and I noticed how the coffee scenery was here, I was like, maybe this is my time to do the trucking. And then I believe that if it wasn't for trucking, my business would not have any sense. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't have any purpose. And I believe that nobody needs to choose between one or the other. If you can think in a good, creative way to mix them both, that's beautiful. And that's what I did.
Yeah, you've definitely done that. And as far as your trucking career, I believe you said you started, was it June of 2023 or March 2023?
Yeah, I'm still a baby in the industry. It started last year.
And what exactly were you doing when you were driving?
Sure. So I started with Schneider. That was my first trucking job. And then one of my classmates from trucking school, she was working in another company. It's a smaller fleet of like 30 trucks or so. And she was like, hey, you want to come over here? You will have more home time. And I was like, sure, because I already had the idea to have the business. So being at home more time will be good for me. So I said yes. And we were contractors moving Amazon trailers. So that's what I was doing, moving Amazon trailers.
Mm-hmm. And so was trucking did it turn out to be like you envisioned it would be when you first were thinking, hey, I want to give this a try?
Yes.
Or was there very much that was different?
So I think I'm one of the very few people that I knew what I was getting myself into. One of my very good friends, Nelson, and he's watching this. I say hi to him and I love him with all my heart. Nelson is a truck driver. We come from the same background. I'm a nurse, former nurse. He's also a nurse, and we're both truck drivers. He has been driving over 10 years, and he loves the road. And he was the one who told me how everything is related to trucking. Like, if this happens, this is what you're gonna, this is how you're gonna resolve it. Don't have this high expectation about this. It won't happen. He was the one who had my eyes open before I got into it. And I think that everybody that would like to be a driver in my opinion, is vital to have somebody that works in the industry that can tell you exactly how it is. I'm not going to tell you that backing up at first was easy. I will be lying. But I can say that it's normal, that it's hard, that is normal, that is going to take time. That is normal, that you have to understand what truck you're using, the distance of the fifth wheel, or if you have all your tandems completely to the back or to the front. If you're at some point for a very short time, I drove a flatbed, and that's a whole different story. So I think having somebody that can tell you how it is, it will not eliminate, but minimize the frustrations that you may have. So everything that I lived is exactly how he described it to me. And I think that that was the best thing that could happen to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure that was really helpful. Mm-hmm. And so were you driving mainly regionally, or were you going like all over?
So I started over the road. And then when I moved into Amazon, my company will have us do over the road. But then the owner decided that he wanted to have everybody doing solo. So I switched to regional. So I will just stay on the West Coast mostly. But whenever he will find a good opportunity to go over the road, then I will go over the road. So I will say over the road and regional kind of
Gotcha.
thing.
And I know you said you're really looking forward to getting back to it when you can, but obviously you have your business that's keeping you busy now. Do you envision being able to balance both pretty easily, or what do you think that'll be like when you?
I've already thought about it. Mm-hmm. I think that for me, going back is very important. That's my primary source of income, and trying to have a business without, funding is very hard. So I definitely want to go back. I have some coffee people, just to put a name, that they have a bigger roaster than I do. And I already had conversations with them. And whenever I need to process a big order, I can always go roast the orders, package everything, and send it out. But I do have somebody here that if I need to hire them to process the orders, I can do that. And that's something that I'm really looking forward to. Once I get back in the truck, I will need to have somebody that can be here, that I can trust, and that can provide the same, the same way I package an order, I'm expecting that or better. So That's going to happen, hopefully sooner than later.
And for people like me who don't necessarily know a lot about coffee, what exactly is going into creating the blend that you make?
So I don't have a blend for right now. So This coffee, it's a single origin. This coffee is from Mexico. It's from Tenango de Doria. And I'm hoping eventually when, little by little, I want to first educate people about what coffee is. Surprisingly, a lot of people don't know coffee is a fruit and grows in tropical areas. It's not grown in the United States, only Hawaii, but because Hawaii is a different island. So I'm hoping to educate people little by little. And that has been amazing because a lot of people tell me, oh, maybe that's why that coffee was so bitter, is because I was drinking a different coffee species. I only work with Arabica coffee beans at the moment, and that bean is more delicate. It needs shade, it needs nutrients, it needs more care. It takes a long time for these cherries to pop up. So basically what we drink is the seed of the cherry. So I'm hoping to educate people to understand what's behind of it. And so far, I had truck drivers try my coffee and they were confused. They will look at the coffee and look at me and be like, why this coffee is so sweet? And I'm like, well, because it was properly worked at a farm level. So I'm very happy to be working with a women's group. They're called Las Adelitas. And that's all they do. They process amazing coffees. I know them for the last 3 years. And what is beautiful about working with them is at the time I was going to have, September is the month of surgeries for me. So 3 years ago during September, I had a surgery. And even though I didn't have necessarily any business idea or plan, whatever, I knew I wanted to work with them. And they said yes. 3 years later, I reached out. I'm like, hey, I'm ready to buy that coffee. And they were like, really? I'm like, yeah, I'm ready to buy that coffee. So I think educating people little by little how the supply chain is and how it looks like, and how also we are part of that, because the coffee doesn't come here walking. We need truckers that can move that product to the United States. And that mix of supply chain, trucking, coffee, I just love it.
If you could kind of elaborate on how that connection between coffee makers and truck drivers, how that plays out in your business or in your market.
Okay. So the business I worked out in Maryland, I will always be very grateful to them, because I think if it wasn't for that company, I wouldn't have half of the knowledge that I have of the industry right now. And the mission of that company is to make business directly with the coffee farmers. Why? Because there's a lot of people in between. You have importers, exporters, you have, people from the the stock market deciding on coffee prices. So that's called the C market. So if you think about spot market for trucking, we have the C market for coffee. So a frustration that I see in trucking is drivers saying, well, brokers don't want to pay what my, operational cost might be. And coffee is exactly the same. Some importers don't want to pay coffee farmers the cost of production of their coffee. So when I see those problems from different industries, but very similar, I said to myself, I don't want to be part of that. I don't want to be part of feeling like somebody's not being valued along the supply chain. And for that reason, I was like, okay, you know what? First, I do believe that drivers deserve better everything, period. better truck stops, safe parking. I mean, you work in Landline, you know the truck parking crisis. We deserve good food, good coffee, all these good things. However, the people that provide these services had never drove a truck before. And talking about coffee, you have a lot of people having coffee businesses, having amazing coffee shops, coffee roasteries, but they never picked up a coffee cherry. And I have. I got, I fell down a hill in a coffee farm. I got the fire ants all, in my face. It took me 3 hours to only being able to pick up 10 pounds of coffee that turned out to be completely dried out. They look like this. This is called green coffee. It's raw coffee. 10 pounds of cherries into 3 pounds of green coffee. So you see there's a lot of time and hands involved. And I was like, you know what? If I want to see something different, I need to make it different. If I want better coffee for drivers, then I have to make sure that I'm working with farms that are doing the great thing that they can in their farms and don't negotiate the prices, because I already know how it feels to be working in a farm. Whatever I pay them is something that makes me feel good because I'm contributing to them having a livelihood out of it. Mm-hmm. Same with drivers. When you pay a driver very little for whatever job whatever they're hauling, you got to think, can they live off that? And if the answer is no, then we need to do something different. That's why the mission of Na Cruzan is to honor the work of those who grow coffee and those who move the world, coffee farmers and truck drivers.
And so do you have any specific plans for the business going forward? Obviously, you have the one product that you sell now. Are you planning to expand
Yes.
the line of what you're selling?
So as of right now, yes. I started out with the over the road. Now I have it available in 2-pound bags because a lot of people were like, the coffee's so good. I ran out of it fast. So I was like, okay, let me have a bigger size. I'm also working on something. It's like a little filter that you put on top of the mug. The only thing you need to do is add hot water. And that's amazing for people like us that are truck drivers because we don't want to deal with the mess. I myself tried the French press in the truck, a mess, don't recommend. So I'm thinking about ways of having good coffee that you can make in 30 minutes or less if you are taking your 30-minute break in the truck. So there's that. I'm waiting for the harvest time in a farm in Puerto Rico because I am from Puerto Rico. Of course, I want to have coffee from my country, but because Puerto Rico is a small island, we don't produce so much. So I'm waiting for harvest season to come and see if I can have the coffee how I have envisioned it. And I'm also currently working on having merch. It's going to be pretty cool. I cannot say details right now, but it's going to be super cool and super different. And one of the other goals I have other than selling online is going to be able to have wholesale accounts. So I'm like putting myself out there. It's hard because I can't walk fully. I look like a little penguin walking and I have a lot of pain. So whenever I have the energy and the strength to go out to a truck stop or a trucking related business, I go show coffee samples and start the process of like putting myself out there. So those are the plans for now.
That was Natasha Cruz-Sanchez speaking with Landline Magazine's Erin Wisdom Watson. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford. Stay tuned for more after this.
Running on ultra-low sulfur diesel? Stay protected this winter with Howe's Diesel Treat and Diesel Lifeline. Steer clear of gel and ice with North America's #1 trusted brand. Find Howe's products nationwide at select retailers, auto parts stores, truck stops, and on Amazon.com.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Welcome back to the show. We're going to close it out by looking at the push to allow autonomous trucks on U.S. roadways. A handful of states are looking at the issue right now, and joining us with the details on what they're considering is Keith Goebel. Keith is a state legislative editor at Landline Magazine, and he joins us here in Studio A. Keith, always good to see you.
Scott, you're looking well.
You are looking well as well.
Well, I appreciate that. It has been, this past couple of days have been,
dog days of winter kind of thing?
Just kind of, it's nearing the end of the NFL football season.
That is true. Well, your team is doing all right, so I think you're probably happy.
So, maybe a little bit too much celebrating. I really need to rein that in a little bit, I guess.
Well, you've had a lot of celebrating as a Chiefs fan in recent years, and looks like maybe that will continue.
But we digress.
We do digress. We're going to talk about something different here, autonomous trucks, actually. We're seeing more and more states look at this issue, which makes sense because it is a growing issue. And as states do that, Keith, it seems most of them are leaning in favor of allowing them. Of course, they're trying to figure out what the rules look like for that, though.
Sure, yeah. Obviously, people realize, it's something that OOIDA has pointed out, this rapid development of this technology definitely has potential. At the same time, there are some notable concerns, challenges as far as how it relates to commercial vehicles and obviously highway safety. States that haven't had rules on this. I mean, again, we're talking about new technology. Here in recent years, we've seen more and more states look to put some rules in place as far as how they're allowed, whether they're allowed. I mean, California is one of the more notable ones. They've been the reverse of this trend of authorization for autonomous trucks. They've been trying to prohibit them, and it has ultimately been vetoed by the governor a couple different times. As we're getting into almost through the end of January, I've been waiting to see if that pursuit's going to be brought back up again in California. Still waiting. Have not seen that bill introduced. But past couple of years, we've been talking about a lot of states, including California. But the states that have actually taken action, you've got like South Dakota. They put in place a regulatory framework so that they're going to allow autonomous trucks on state roads without a person behind the wheel. Which obviously, some folks are a bit, concerned about that. And then the year before that, 2023, you had both Arkansas and Mississippi. They acted to put in place rules on truck platoons. Again, without an actual person in trailing vehicles. A person's required to be in the lead vehicle, but not in the trailing vehicle. So you have states that have looked to put rules in place on the use of autonomous trucks, and you have other states really. Some of the focus has been on rules for truck platoons themselves. So, definitely a topic that we're going to continue to see states looking to put in place rules or modify rules that they've put in place as time has gone on to try to make adjustments. And year by year, it's interesting to follow.
Yeah, eventually the list is going to include all 50 states, I would imagine, here. But for the time being, we've got a handful of states, I think 5, that are looking at this issue as we speak right now. One of them being Delaware. What are they doing there? And I guess what are the possibilities?
Yeah, what they're trying to do a year ago, and again, talking about activity from the past year. A year ago, the Delaware Senate unanimously approved legislation that would prohibit autonomous trucks in excess of 10,000 pounds from operating there on their state highways. Now, the bill did not get brought up for consideration in the House, so it died. The same Delaware state senator has brought a nearly identical version of that legislation back this year. The most notable change being, as I mentioned a year ago, it was 10,000 pounds and up. It would be prohibited. They've changed that this year. It's 26,000 pounds and up would be prohibited for testing purposes, prohibited for transporting goods, transporting passengers, if they do not have an actual human driver physically present in the vehicle. So, time will tell if that little tweak on the weight restriction is the difference this year.
That's Delaware. Just a little bit, I guess, to the west here, to Maryland, the neighboring state there, looking at the issue as well. Looks like a pretty similar conversation that's being had there.
Yeah, essentially what they've got in Maryland here, a House bill is, I think it's identical. I mean, it's the same stuff as the Delaware bill was last year with that 10,000 pound and up requirement to have someone fully present in the vehicle while it's in operation.
Moving to Montana, and you mentioned South Dakota earlier and what they've done, I guess last year or the year before that maybe, with regard to autonomous vehicles. You would think that Montana may be thinking in the same way just because of the landscape being similar there between the two states. But they are looking at this issue there in Montana. What exactly do they have in mind?
Yeah, unique Montana provision that I'll get into here in a moment, their focus with this legislation, currently they don't have rules, they don't have guidelines for platooning, commercial vehicle platooning. Again, another example of a state not having a rule in place, so trying to put some, I guess you say, guardrails. One of the things that the House sponsor of this legislation, Representative Zach Worth, has said, so they need some guardrails for how they're going to move forward with this in Montana if they can make it work. His legislation would allow truck platooning as long as the lead vehicle has a person there and they have a CDL, which obviously it's pretty much any pursuit in state houses across the country. Obviously, they want to have a human operator, but they need to have a CDL as well. And be able to take possession, take control of the vehicle if necessary while they're in there. But yeah, again, in Montana, what they're looking to do is, if you've got a partially or fully autonomous truck, you could have a truck platoon. Up to 3 trucks, so putting rules in place on the number of vehicles that could be in a platoon. And there's also a provision in this legislation that would allow for the Montana DOT to restrict platooning. I mean, if there's a weather situation, or as it was described in a dangerous road condition, obviously you're talking or predicted periods of potential dangerous road conditions, not permitting any platooning to be going on. So that is a bit unique. We don't really see that in very many states where they have that special component to it, as they're trying to essentially open the door to authorizing truck platooning in certain capacity, but having some limitations on exactly how much could be done.
Yeah, that strikes me as being pretty important in a state like Montana when you consider weather, considerations there, and you would think that other states would keep that in mind as well too when crafting these bills, and it's certainly something that they're going to have to think about moving forward here with regard to all of this. In fact, there's a bunch of other stuff I'm sure they haven't thought of that will pop up here over time. Real quick, we don't have a whole lot of time here, but Indiana and Virginia also looking at this issue. Real quick, what are they looking at doing? Yeah,
in Indiana, again, they don't have a rule in place on whether you're supposed to be present in an automated vehicle. What that is in a platoon, legislation would address that, specifically saying you've got to have a human operator physically present in that lead vehicle. Also, you've got Virginia's another one that I've come across here recently. There's a bill there. House bill would permit, if you've got a fully autonomous vehicle, it would allow for operating there in the state under certain circumstances. The rule is specifically would apply to larger vehicles here in excess of 62,000 pounds. So very specific. Obviously, you could have much lighter trucks there in Virginia that this rule does not address. But specifically, the focus there in Virginia with this one is the larger trucks.
The robots are coming, Keith. Whether we like it or not,
indeed.
I guess. Yeah, for
maybe even robotic referees too, huh?
Well, yeah. Going back to sports.
It all ties in.
There it is. Keith Goebel of Landline Magazine. Everybody, we'll see you again soon, Keith. Thanks very much.
Well, thanks for having me.
Our thanks to Keith for joining us today, and our thanks to you for doing the same. For trucking news 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, head on over to our website, landline.media. Until next time, take care and drive safe.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad.
A son.
A husband.
Wife.
I'm a writer.
Photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing.
My kids.
Chrome.
And I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA. OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us! Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.